Hi guys, so it is my great privilege to sit with my personal hero, Jay Smith, to talk about this book, if I can borrow it. This book, written by Daniel Brubaker, Dr. Daniel Brubaker, Corrections in Early Quran Manuscripts. And he's given, it says 20 examples, but apparently he got talked into sticking 2 extra ones in there. And I just want to talk through this material with Jay for you in an environment that doesn't have all the shouting and the screaming and the issues connected. And I'll just sort of introduce it as by saying that this was one of the earliest arguments that I had heard from Muslims against the Christian faith, which is that your Bible has been changed and therefore your Bible is unreliable. Now, Jay, why would a Muslim make that kind of argument against a Christian about the Bible?
For 2 reasons. Bob, thanks. This is great to be with you finally, to be able to talk face to face.
Ditto.
The first problem is that, or the reason that they are really attacking the Bible, is because there's been so much out there about the Bible. We're the only book that's ever had these tests applied to it. You take a look at all the great historical criticism, redacted criticism, source criticism, textual criticism. These words, these names were invented on the Bible. This Bible has been attacked since the 1800s. So coming up to 200 years, they have tried every kind of criticism, created the criticisms on this Bible. Nothing has ever been done against the Quran on these areas, in these areas. And every Muslim who has been to any madrasa or any mosque anywhere or listened to any cleric teach on the Quran has heard, secondly, that the Quran is not only eternal, number one, that it was sent down to a man named Muhammad over 22 years, 610 to 632, that it was complete, there's the word, complete, at the time of Uthman, 652, and that this book that I have in my hand today, this Arabic, this is the Arabic side, that's the English, the Arabic side, that's the Quran, is exactly the same as that which was in heaven, that which was given to Muhammad, that which was then codified by Uthman. Every chapter, every verse, every word, every letter, and as we heard yesterday, even every diacritical mark, every dot and vowelization is exactly the same as that which we have in heaven. Now, that is drilled into their head. There has never been any other narrative. Have you heard of another narrative?
No, absolutely. I think, and I think that probably underpins the reason why the Muslims make the argument against the Bible, that it has been changed, and they quote all these kind of studies from the 1800s, because they have been convinced since childhood that the Quran has never been changed. So when they encounter all this research that talks about textual variants within the New Testament and so on, they think that somehow invalidates the Bible.
May I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
And probably the most important thing. That's all what they've heard. The more damaging part is that Muslims only have one authority to go to, and that's this book. This book has always existed eternally. Therefore, how can it have any human intervention? How could there be anybody that has either changed it, deleted it, or created it, had anything to do with it? Once you have human intervention of any kind, it immediately takes it away from these eternal tablets.
Yeah.
It is inimitable, is the word they love to use. I've been getting that since the 1990s. It is above criticism, unlike the Bible, because it doesn't follow in the same category as the Bible. This is not inimitable. We know it's written by men. We know who the men's names are. Many of the books we give the men's names to. So immediately, you see, we're talking about 2 different categories.
Yeah.
Now, if that is the case, this is their own authority, the only authority they have, the only source they can go to for everything they believe.
And they understand the Quran to be the literal word of God, whereas Christians understand the Bible to be the inspired words of men.
And inspired words of men, written by men, inspired by God.
Exactly, and that gives a radical difference to how we understand the 2 books.
Yeah.
And also that the Bible is a document that points to our real authority, which is Jesus Christ.
Who is the Word of God.
Who is the Word of God, exactly. The Scriptures point to Jesus like the Church points to Jesus, because the Christian faith is a person-based religion. But by contrast, Islam is a book-based religion, and that is literally meant to be the words of
This
God.
is greater than Muhammad. This is greater than everybody.
Yeah.
Co-equal with God. If it is co-eternal with God, that's a duality all right there. Now,
But certainly, I don't want to get too far off.
no, but
off
you
our
see, if
conversation
that is the
point.
case, can you then understand why anybody who claims that this is written by men, as we are now doing, who claims it's not even revealed to a man named Muhammad, it couldn't have been, nor was it ever codified and completed at the time of Uthman, and that it is full of changes, what does that do to its credibility? What would that do to every Muslim's faith? Because that would destroy everything that they are dependent on. So it's much more than just an argument of text criticism. We're arguing for the whole integrity of Islam by this argument.
Because it affects a fundamental claim, particularly that lots of modern polemicists and apologists make, that this idea of the book is an unchanged thing.
Well, the Quran makes that claim itself.
Exactly.
In chapter 85, verse 22.
Yeah, and if it has been changed, what kind of evidences would we expect to see to demonstrate change in the text of the Quran?
Okay, before we even ask that, where would we go to find that original Quran that they're claiming existed?
Answer my question. So, what kind of evidence, what kind of things would we be expecting to see in terms of changes?
Okay, I understood, but the problem is you'd have to go to some manuscripts to find that. The changes we're looking for are any accretions, any deletions, any replacements, any coverings, any erasures, any insertions, anything. Just one. All we need is one to show that this is not from God, nor could it could be eternal.
Yep.
Because that's a man-made. Anytime you have an insertion or a deletion or accretion or eraser, anytime you see anything that is a manipulation of the text, that's man-made.
Exactly. And in terms of an historical query into a text, how would you go about inquiring a text and to note if there was evolution in a text? How would you go about doing that?
You'd have to have the original.
You have to have the original. Do we have an original?
Or the oldest, the closest to the original.
Okay, so do we have an original?
Muslims would claim yes.
Right, and what would they claim?
They claim there are 6 of them.
Give me what those 6 are.
The Topkapı, which is the manuscript that is in Istanbul, in Topkapı Museum. The Samarkand, which is in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. The Mayan manuscript, which is right here. We're right here at the British Library. I don't know if people know that. The British Library is right behind us.
Yep.
So in that building right there is the 3rd most important manuscript in the world. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this in front of the British Library.
Yeah.
Then you have the Petropolis manuscript, which is in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, just across the channel. And then you have what we call the Husseini manuscript in Cairo. It's also known as the Fustat manuscript. But probably the most important one, the earliest one, the best one as far as dating is concerned, would be the Sana'a manuscript, which is in Yemen, in Sana'a.
Okay, so we have these early manuscripts, these 6 early manuscripts, extant manuscripts. Do we have a system of school within Islam of Muslims who've compared these different Qurans and then demonstrated that they're all identical? I mean, does such a thing exist? Who would you name as someone then? And this is coming to the book. Tell us about Dan Brubaker and what he's
someone gone. When you say who has done this, there are 2 Muslim scholars, Dr. Tyler Altukulic and Dr. Ekmel Nisanoğlu from Turkey, who control the Topkapı manuscript, which is considered to be the best of all the manuscripts.
Right.
There has been a debate, much of it engendered by us, from Speaker's Corner, where the claim has been made by people like Adnan Rashid that there were 100,000 of these manuscripts. He claimed that he had 2 or 3 that he owned that were from the time of Uthman. He used to claim this in the early 2000s. After we confronted him on that, he brought it down to 10,000. After that, it was then brought down to about 1,000 manuscripts. Islamic Awareness, which is the largest website anywhere in the world that is a repository for all the earliest manuscripts, would never make that claim. That comes from Cambridge University. Mansour Ahmed is one of the writers and the researchers for that website. He never has made that claim. People like Adnan Rashid have. We finally came down to of these 6 manuscripts in 2014. These 6 manuscripts are claimed by the Muslims themselves, like Al-Quranic and also Iqnan and Nasr. They were the ones that claimed that these are the 6 major manuscripts. There's no one really that has confronted that claim.
Did these 2 Muslim scholars identify that the texts that they were in control of and studied were identical to every other Quran in the world? No.
The study came out in 2007. It was made into English. It was translated to English in 2009. I got it in 2013.
Yeah.
You can get it. It's up online. Go and pull it down. In fact, people can get it. Just all you need to do is read the introduction. It's 83 pages long, and read what they say.
And summarize what they're saying.
Basically, they're saying none of these 6 manuscripts are from the time of Wuthun. Not one. Not one. There is no manuscript from the time of Wuthun.
Do they say that they're identical to every other Quran?
Not one of them is the same.
Not one of the earliest manuscripts of
these 6. Not one of them is complete.
Not one of them is complete.
And not one of them.
So they're not complete. They're not identical to one another.
Nope.
And they're not identical to the Quran that Muslims are using today.
That's the 4th claim, and we haven't got to that. That is, not one of them is exactly the same as this Quran, the Hafs Quran that we're using today. That one there.
Yeah.
They made that claim back in 2009. It was really made public. I made it public at the big debate that we had with Shabbat Ali in 2014. So by 2014, the world now knew that no Quran, none of the earliest manuscripts, is exactly like the Quran we have here. Now,
Right.
the top copy would have been the best.
So you've got these 2 Muslim scholars who've done that, and they're alive today. They're in living memory, aren't they?
They're still alive today.
Okay, and obviously people like Dr. Dan Brubaker have taken that a step further. Tell us a little bit about him and his research and his privileged position in terms of looking.
Neither of those 2 Muslim scholars have done any more than just that.
Yeah.
They have not gone and actually looked for variants. They've just claimed, for instance, the top copy, the best they've got. They did claim that there are 2,270 variants in just that manuscript. Variants from what? From this.
Yeah.
So they're using a standard. This is the standard. So when they call them variants,
they are saying that the variants of the earliest text to the later text, i.e. it's the top Khani is variant to the one in your hand, the top copy is variant to the one in your hand.
2,270 words or phrases than what we have here. Now notice, what does that mean? Let me just define terms. They're not talking about diacritical marks, because there are no diacritical marks in the top copy.
Yeah.
They haven't been invented yet.
Yeah.
The dots above and below the lines.
How old is the top copy?
That's the other million-dollar question. I don't know if you were there. You weren't there at the debate yesterday.
No.
Mansour tried to say that this is in the 1st century AH. He was not quoting his own scholars.
Right.
The scholars are very clear that the top copy has about a 100-year range.
Yep.
They were saying the second half of the 1st century AH goes from 622 to 721.
Yeah.
Or also the first half of the 2nd century, which goes from 721 to 770. So basically, the Muslim scholars are saying the top copy is within a range of 670 to 770.
Okay. When were the diacritical marks introduced to the text of the Quran?
Well, they were beginning to be introduced in the late 8th century. And when you look at the top copy, you will see that there are dots that have been put into it, but they're in red ink, which means they've been added at a much later date.
Yeah.
So when the top copy was first created, there was no dot.
And that's an example of manipulation of the text.
That's an example, of course, but then you might say, oh, that's because Arabic did not accommodate it that early.
Yeah.
Diacritical marks would have to be created in order to accommodate the reading of it, which is really odd. Why would God, in His wisdom, give the greatest revelation to mankind in a language that couldn't even accommodate that revelation?
Yeah, they didn't even have a smart formed alphabet.
That's right. There was no alphabet when He had at His disposal Hebrew and Greek, which He had already used in the earlier manuscripts.
Apparently, He could already used. Yeah.
Well, in the Bible.
Focusing in on Dr. Dan Brubaker's book, and focusing in on Dr. Dan Brubaker, tell us about the privileged position that Dr. Dan Brubaker had in the work that he went on to do.
Dr. Dan Brubaker, doing his doctoral thesis out of Rice University in Texas, decided in 2010 that he wanted to look for he wanted just to find one correction, possibly at the most 5 corrections, when he started out his thesis.
So he had very low goals.
And so did we all.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us. I was the same boat. You weren't even around
Yeah.
in that discussion yet.
Yeah.
Now, all of us were in that discussion back in 2010. We were looking, we really just needed one. Because then we could say, there is human intervention.
Yeah.
What we're looking for is human intervention. A claim we would never make about the Bible because the Bible is full. This is all human intervention.
Yes.
So this is a claim only for the Quran. He started in 2010, wanting to find possibly 5. He would have been happy for 5.
Yeah.
He was given permission because he was doing a doctoral thesis to go see the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Michael, the Petapolis, the Husseini, and the Sana manuscripts.
They had access to all of them.
All 6 of them, plus 4 others that are a little bit after, but comparable and co-dating with those first 6. So he went to the St. Petersburg manuscripts, the Marcel manuscripts. He went to Doha, the ones that are in Qatar, and he went to 2 other ones that were in Istanbul, but not in the Topkapi. So he went to about 10 manuscripts, all of which are considered by any scholar that's worth their salt as the earliest extant manuscripts.
What did he find?
Well, he took pictures of every one of them, and as he started taking pictures of them, and he was given access to all of them, he noticed that there was variant after variant after variant.
Between one another?
Not only between one another, but mostly with this one.
So they varianted between one another and the 19th.
I can't say yet whether they are very, because that's yet to be done. That's another topic. Maybe you can do that one.
Probably.
Because there is so much yet to do. Remember, he's the first to do this.
Yeah.
Alta Kulic and Sanlu were given 5 years between 2002 to 2007 just to look at those 6. And they did it cursory look. They didn't really do an in-depth because they're not even answering the question you're asking.
Yeah. They were asking different.
Nor is Dan answering the question you're asking.
Yeah.
He hasn't had a chance to look at one between the other.
Yeah.
That has yet to be done.
So
and anybody watching this, can you do that?
So his question was, how do these compare to the one in your hand?
He only wanted to see if there was variance with this one.
Right.
Because
So
this
that
is
was
the official
primary
text.
aim of his
This
research.
is the Huff's text.
But what did he find?
He found 800
800.
insertions,
Yeah.
deletions,
Yeah.
erasers,
Yeah.
coverings,
Yeah.
tapings.
Mhm.
Now, coverings with writing over top of them.
Right.
Now, what am I talking about?
Yeah, let's just break down those terms because a lot of our audience are not going to be academics or understand the
Let's show
language.
them. Let's show them right here.
So let's just go through some and then and discuss them.
How do we do that? Why do we introduce this book?
So this is the book, guys, that you need to go and buy. It annuls the arguments around whether the text of the Quran has been perfectly preserved, and it does so by
This book has only been available in the last 24 hours. So anybody watching this, you can go buy it.
we got an exclusive, guys. We got an exclusive.
And it is made for laymen. It's made for lay people. Not only does it give you where the variant is, it shows you in a text, in a modern day Huff's text, where it should be, why it's missing, and what's before and after, so you can do a comparative. So any Muslim who's watching this is for you. This is your Quran. This is something no Muslim has done. Dan Brubaker has to do it. It's not even his text.
It'll be interesting to see how the Islamic academic world engages with this this line of argumentation. So starting with its first one, which is number 1 insertion in the Topkapi, Surah 9. Topkapi, Surah 972. What is it that we're looking at?
Why do we start with this one? I've asked Dan, it's important that we do start with the Topkapi, because the Topkapi is the only manuscript that most of the Muslims who are in the discussion are willing to defend now.
Right.
They're no longer going to defend the Salah manuscript because of the book that came out last year by Asma Hilal, which pretty much destroys the Salah because of the palimpsests, because
Yeah,
it's a
because
lower
they
text.
said she
This
has
is
been
really
written off as a student's Quran.
That's an excuse.
But let's come back around to that if we've got time.
So we start with the Topkapi. So you can see there is a huwa. Huwa is the word. Okay, that is this. If we're going to put it up on the screen, and it says what Ridwanun min Allahu Akbaru Dalika Huwa Fawzu Azim. Excuse my Arabic. I'm a terrible. I don't know anybody who's going to cringe their ears. I'm an American speaking Arabic as an American. But the translation of that is, and Allah's good pleasure is greater. That is the great triumph. That's what it says. The word huwa, that is not in the text here. It had to be added at a later date. Can you see it's much smaller?
Yeah, it's been
They had to
squashed.
shrink it to get in there.
Squashed in, hasn't it?
And it's with a different nib, a much thinner nib,
Yeah.
by a different hand.
So the thicker lines that you can see
Are the original.
are the original, and then someone's come along with a finer nib and then squashed it in. So that is an obvious later correction.
But hold on a minute, there's no reason to put the hua there.
Yeah.
The meaning is still the same.
Yeah.
So why did they have to put the hua there?
Well, it would seem to me to indicate. Let me just play devil's advocate. That would seem to indicate to me a scribal error. Someone has.
Wait, of what?
Let me explain. Someone has made a scribal error. They've then spotted that scribal error and they've come back and inserted it into the.
There's no scribal error there.
Go on, explain.
The name is whether you put it is or you leave it that is or leave it that is, either in or out, it still means the same thing.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by scribal error?
Well, a scribal error, as in the word should have been there, but they forgot to write it in.
Should have been there. What do you mean by that?
Well, there is some earlier understanding of the text that includes that
Earlier?
word.
How about later?
Well,
Obviously, this does not fit the standard.
Well, I think what's important is to remember that the top copy is one of the earliest texts that we have.
Okay, so why did they just leave the whole out?
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah,
I'm
but you
playing
haven't
devil's
answered my
advocate.
question yet.
Well, I'm suggesting to you that it's evidence of an earlier textual tradition that the top copy contradicts.
So give me something new. Give me a name.
But that's the problem. There isn't anything.
There is. There's one called
There is?
Sana.
Oh, the Sana manuscript.
The Sana
Yes, of
doesn't
course.
have it either.
The Sana doesn't either.
So what has it that
That's
they have to
interesting.
add it? What
So-
is it? Why are they adding the word there?
So what we've got then, like my personal theory from being introduced to this material is that there's evidence clearly that there's multiple textual traditions to the Quran, and that they don't match.
Okay, so
And that
again, getting back to this one,
yes,
why do they have to put the word in there?
because someone came along with familiarity to a different textual tradition and added it.
Who and when and where?
That is a brilliant question to which I don't have any of the answers.
This is it.
The 1920s.
This does not parallel this book.
Yeah.
This does not parallel the 1924 Huff's text. The Huff's text has a hua there.
Yes.
Therefore, they had to put the hua in there so that it parallels 1924. Hold on, that's not even 100 years ago.
Well, I don't want to. I want to come into that argument later because I do disagree with some of your analysis of this information.
I'm putting it out there.
Yeah,
That's the
fine.
first one. Let's
That's
look at the
fine.
second one.
So let's look at another one. Okay. So we've got
Number
here,
2, and we're going to go on sequence as
Yeah.
they are in the book itself, so people can have the book
and I'll
alongside.
try and find number 3 while you're talking.
Lahud
about it.
is-
Just introduce it.
If you look here, and you can see there on the screen, look at the green arrow. The green arrow is pointing to this word here, lahum. This will be on your screen, okay? Lahum, which means for him. Now, originally, it was just a lam and a he. The mim was not there, just the lam and the he, if you speak Arabic. They had to erase that. Did you hear that? They erased it and wrote over top of it.
Yeah.
So here you have an eraser in the Petropolitanus manuscript, which is from the early 8th century,
Yeah.
around the same time as the Topkapi, and they've taken the lamhe out and added lahum. Originally it said, or do they have associates who enacted for him?
Yeah.
Now it says, or do they have associates who enacted for them? So they made it from singular into plural.
So it's an incontrovertible manipulation of the text that has a direct transformation of the meaning.
It changes the meaning, because now
In a
it makes-
minor way.
nonetheless,
but it's
this
a
is
change.
God's holy word that has been eternal
And never
has
changed.
no human intervention. There is a human intervention.
Yeah.
And it's also, you could probably do a doctoral thesis just on this correction. Because what you need to do is pull this back and say, how does that now change the verse? And what does that do about the theology of it, whether God, the person is singular or plural?
Yes.
Huge amount of significance on this.
Yep.
I'm not interested in that right now. I just want to know, are there any human interventions?
Yes.
That's number 2.
So that's an example of an erasure with an addition.
Okay.
So let's look at. I'm going to skip because there are some that are more interesting.
I want to show 3, because we need to go in sequence.
Okay.
Because that one's really
But
gets
can I? We'll show 3, but I do want to. There are certain ones I've pulled out on purpose because we're on a time limit. We can't go through all 20 odd. So there are some that I want to talk about. So let's talk about number
this
3.
one's exciting.
Okay. So Just
Number 3,
introduce
we'll
them.
put it up there for you. Now take a look. We put it into 9 panels here. And the reason why, in every one of those panels, can you see Allah, 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 Allah.
Yeah.
Allah has been added in at a later date. This is in the same Fustat manuscript, which is from Egypt.
Yep.
It is the same manuscript.
So
This
that's
is
a
just-
9th century. Now, it's important just to point out, Jay, for our audiences, that by the 9th century, the Muslims were in charge of a powerful, wealthy empire. A powerful, wealthy empire that had the ability to have professionals produce manuscripts. I think
by
it was
the
just,
7th century, by
well,
661.
yeah, but by the 9th century, it was pretty well.
By Abdul al-Malik, who
Yeah.
then controlled from Spain all the way to India.
Yep.
That's 685, so that's the late 7th century. They could do what you're claiming.
And yet, we don't have any codex from the 7th century.
From the time of Abdul Malik, we have none.
None at all, despite the fact that they had the resources and the empire to do it.
The possible undertext, palimpsest of the Sana could be from this time.
Possibly. Okay.
Yes. So here we have 9 examples of the name Allah. Remember, this is the name for God. Whoever wrote this manuscript forgot God's name.
How many times?
Well, this is just 9 we have here. He's found 12 so far.
So there were 12 examples in this manuscript where the scribe of the 9th century manuscript we're talking about forgot to insert the word Allah.
It could have been centuries later they put that on. We have no idea because we
Yeah.
haven't had access to this manuscript to date the ink.
Right. But not that we could date the ink.
Not that you could date the ink, but can you
No.
see, if you don't know God's name, if his name's not even there, what in the world, who is it that you're referring to in all these verses?
Well, I mean, this to me, because Allah's name will have appeared in that text in other places.
Where does it appear?
Well, no, hold on. In the very text itself, in that we're talking about just talking about the 9th century text. The name Allah would have still been in other places.
Why is it not in those places?
Well, that's a very good question. It's a
I'm going to
very
keep
good
coming
question.
back to this. I know you don't want me to.
No, it's not that I don't want you to. It's
The
just-
reason they had to then introduce it is because this text has it in those 12 places.
Again, you kind of jump in the gun because I do disagree with the conclusion, but I don't want to get to the conclusion yet until we've gone to something
I'm not
else.
even concluding. I'm just reminding it that in every case they're standardizing the text.
There is a standardization of the text, definitely. But I'm aware of your theory, and it's your theory that I disagree with. But what
I haven't said
find
my theory
interesting- I know what your theory is.
I'm not going to say it.
I know you. I know. I
I'm going to leave you hanging dry.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make sure everybody watching questions as to why all these changes are here.
Yes, that's what we're doing. But I would put it to you that what we're actually seeing is an attempt within the Islamic world, much earlier than modern times, to try and standardize the text. And I wonder personally whether there is some Arabic book out there, some Arabic history book out there that's yet to be translated, maybe even forgotten, some ancient Arabic document that might even record an attempt, like the Jews had an attempt to sort of standardize the Old Testament much later than the time of Christ. That there might be a record within Islamic history of Muslims attempting again to standardize the text.
I think the book is there.
You know,
There it is.
no.
Unfortunately, not read by Muslims. Let's
Yeah.
move on.
Right.
Now,
Let's just talk about this for a moment. So we've got additions to the word Allah. Now, it's significant that the addition of the name of Allah, you would imagine, because it's Allah's name, it would be something quite precious. That it would, it's not like the Greek letter.
Let me show you another one. This one came up yesterday at the debate.
Okay.
And this is very significant. It's going to answer it real quickly. We wanted to show chapter 44, chapter 66, verse 8. Now, chapter 66, verse 8 is very innocuous. But Mansur jumped on it really quick.
Right. Well,
Because
explain.
if you look here, we're going to put it, it's actually slide number 11. So it's, not slide number, it's correction number 11 in Dan's book.
Yeah.
So we're jumping ahead.
Yeah.
You will notice that the word Allah, there's the Allah, it's very significant. It's out in the margin. It's obvious it was added at a later date.
Yes.
Okay? What's fascinating is, this is in chapter 66, verse 8, in the Topkapi. There's the Topkapi again.
Yep.
We wanted to hit the top copy.
So we now gone to the top copy.
Top copy, back to the top copy.
Back to the top.
Meanwhile, between this, we've gone to the BNF, which is the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. We've also gone to the Doha manuscript, and we've been up to with the Sanaa. Now we're coming back to the top copy. We started the top copy. We now come back to the top copy. Hamansu said, "See, what you need to do, Jay, if you only knew what you were doing, is to look at any manuscript that predates this.
Yes.
Compare and see if Allah is in that manuscript."
Yes.
I said, "Well, what manuscript predates this?" He said, "Well, the Sanaa manuscript, which is true. It's 705. This is around 720 to possibly 750.
Yep.
So 705 is the earliest Sanaa.
Yes.
Yep. So we looked it up real quickly. Hatun was right next to me. She looked up everything that is in the Sanaa manuscript. Chapter 66 is not even there. It doesn't exist.
Doesn't even go to 66.
No.
So there's no textual, at this moment in time, pending some later discovery, there is actually no evidential way that a Muslim could verify which is the correct text.
Because there's nothing earlier.
Or without the Allah.
Exactly. Now, we did that within 5 minutes, standing on the ladder, because we were questioned about it. If we can do that in 5 minutes, can you see? They've had this around for 1,400 years. Why haven't they been doing this?
And that's the point that I wanted to draw between these with regards to the Allahs, is that in terms of verifying the text, the argument that's made by Muslims is you just go off the earliest text. Whatever the earliest text says is the correct one, because it's never been changed. It's a logical reasoning, isn't it? Like, because my book has never been changed, whatever the earliest text says is always the correct one.
Copyist errors is what he said.
Exactly. But the point is, if you have a textual variant, as you've just highlighted here on the word Allah, but you don't have an earlier text that can verify whether it should or should not be in the text, then you have no way of being certain whether the addition or the deletion is the correct variant.
There you go. Bingo. Now, let's go one step further. Look at the next one.
So,
Number 4.
And this one for me, I think, I find
This is the clincher.
that the 2 points that I find most powerful about Dr. Danbury Baker's book are the erasures and the tapings.
Or the coverings.
The coverings, yeah. Sorry. What's the difference between a covering and a taping?
He didn't go into the tapings at all in his book, in this book. That will come. The tapings are big block tapes. They're squares. They look like there's been damage until you look at the backside and there's no damage there. So obviously they're actually covering an entire section of the Quran.
Interesting.
That he didn't put into the Quran. That's yet to come. Remember, there's 4,000 of these developing. But this is nothing more than
so
appetizer.
That's a taping.
That's what he calls taping.
Okay, so tell us what a covering is then.
Okay, we're going to get to that, but let's do with the erasures. Covering is just when you cover a strip over a line or over a word, and then you either leave it blank or you write over top of it.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, because you've got to remember that many of our audience are totally uninitiated to the terminology you're using. Even I'm still
you understand
learning.
what we're saying, right?
Even I'm still learning. So in terms of the erasures and the coverings, the reason why I find them the most important is because what that means is someone for some reason felt that they needed to put words into a text that then someone later thinks shouldn't be there. And that is devastating.
I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. If you're a scribist, and obviously the bigger the taping, the bigger the error. So if you're a scribist and you write an entire sentence down because you think it should be there, and then someone later comes along and says, hold on, that entire sentence shouldn't be there, I'll put a tape over the top. That implies that the first scribe was using some source or some material saying that those words should be there, and then the later scribe who's covering it up is saying, or erasing it, is using a different source and a different material to say that it shouldn't be.
Okay.
But yet this is meant to be one identical Quran.
Well,
is that
I'm going to keep coming back to this.
Is that
you were right on the first half.
Yeah.
The second part, I would suggest there we know why they have to erase it, why they have to cover it. We know what the source is that they're going to.
It's the Hafs.
It's the Hafs.
Yeah, but
it's going to be boring because I'm going to keep saying, and this is what Dan, one of his major theses is, in every case except for about 5 that he has been able to identify, in every case, every time you see an eraser, every time you see a covering, every time you see an insertion, every time you see a deletion, in every case, it's to standardize it to the current text.
Yeah.
Bingo. So I know that you don't want me to say it, But
No,
I
no.
have to come to some conclusion at some
I'm going to
point.
correct you, Jay, because that's the second time you've said that. It isn't that I don't want you to say it. It is that I think that what it implies is different from the theory that I know you have. I know you have one theory about what's going on. I disagree with that theory, and we're going to talk about that. But let's get back to
We want to get our drinks.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you.
Bridget.
That's all right. So let's talk about this erasure, because I think this is...
I mean, this proves your point right there,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Take a look at this. We put this up on the slide. This is Surah 30.
So this
ayah
is
9.
slide number 4.
Slide number 4.
Which manuscript is it looking
It's
at?
from the National Library of Russia. This is the St. Petersburg.
The St. Petersburg.
This is
And
not
go
one of
on.
the earliest 6. It's one of the 7th or 8th. And what you have an eraser between Akibatu, the fate, and Aladina of those.
Yeah.
So the correction now aligns with the Hafs text. By taking this out, by erasing this, what you see that's left behind,
What was the word taken out, sorry?
we don't know. Can you tell me?
No.
Bingo. There's the problem. We have no idea what was taken out.
So someone actually thought that there was words or
There was
words.
words there.
Yeah, of course. But someone, whether it was a word or words, but someone obviously thought who was writing this St. Petersburg manuscript that there was extra words in the text.
Extra from what?
Exactly.
You don't want to. I'm going to tell you. It's because the Hafs doesn't have those words there.
Yeah. But
So the
no,
correction-
hold on. What's interesting is why did the scribe who wrote the St. Petersburg, what was he using to add extra words? That for me is the real chunky question.
We can't know that because we're not the scribe.
Yeah.
What we do know is that what has been erased is between 4 and 6 letters. That by comparing the size with the words around it.
Okay.
So it's only about 4 to 6 letters.
So a word then, or maybe
Possibly
2
or
words.
2 words.
2 words.
But obviously doesn't exist in the text today. It did then.
Yeah. Well, that's the really interesting thing is we've got an example of a scribe adding 2.
And now we're coming to the covenants.
Don't jump ahead. Stop trying to take over this interview. So we've
so controlling.
we've got a text here. We've got a text here because for me, what I find fundamentally important, and this is the question every Muslim needs to answer, is when that scribe was writing down that text, why did he feel that there were extra words that he was copying? And then this is the discussion point is then someone comes along later and takes it out. You know. So let's look at slide 22, coverings overwritten from the Cairo
And
Moshe.
we're kind of jumping around this one. This is right. These are the 2 that I asked Dan to include in his book. He didn't have these, and I said, "You've got to." There's quite a few of these, but he decided to go ahead and do this one on my request. So I thank you for that. This is from the Cairo Musaf al-Sharif, and it's chapter 13, verse 11 to 12. On the first line, pictured, where the green arrow is, all but the first 2 letters of Anfusihim in themselves has been written on top of such of the cover that you see there. Now, on the second to last line, which is down here, you can see, if you look carefully, you can see the covering itself. Can you see the
Yeah,
lines
you
of the
can
covering?
see the outline of the covering.
The
Yeah.
covering has been made there, and then they have added another text.
Yes.
Can you tell it's a completely different, it's much darker ink, it's much newer ink, and it's more stylized than anything around it.
It's like the medieval equivalent of Tippets.
That's right. You can see that, that's right, Tipex. So what they have done, they have covered over in not 1 line, but 2 lines. So you're talking almost an entire verse here. They have covered over that doesn't correspond with what we have today, and they've only written about half as many words. That's why they've had to elongate the letters.
In a style that doesn't match the rest of that entire
Absolutely
passage.
not. Well, in
It
fact,
stands out, doesn't
that
it?
is so exaggerated. They've exaggerated there that you almost can't even see that that's a copy.
Yeah.
You have to know your Arabic pretty good to be. It is almost like it's like it's almost like I don't know how to explain. Like they slid their pen by accident.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to keep up. They're trying to replace the existing erased material or covered material with enough text so that possibly we won't notice.
Yeah.
And you notice it. Anybody else can.
And
notice
this is the Mushaf al-Sharif. Is that the one in Egypt?
This is the one in Egypt, right?
Okay. And again, that goes back to this idea that one scribe was using one source material that had certain words, and then another scribe has come along a little later on, and he's correcting.
And you say a little later on. I didn't say much later on.
Well, right. So,
can we go to the other one that's just like this?
Yeah, which one is that?
That's number 21.
21, and then we'll talk about theories about why we think that might have happened. Okay. And this is where me and you are going to disagree. Okay, that's why I'm trying to hold you back from jumping ahead.
I want you to look at this one here. We'll put this up on the screen for you.
And this is slide number.
This is again for the same manuscript we just looked at. This is slide number 21 in Dan's book. Take a look and you'll see. Count how many different green arrows, because each green arrow is pointing to a covering. If you look carefully, you can see every one of the coverings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 coverings on just one page. So much so that you almost cannot read what's left behind. It is so uta-puta, as we say in India, which suggests to me that censorship in a huge scale on one page.
Yeah.
Now, what is left behind and what does it correspond to? What's left behind, what you can read, now corresponds with the Haf's text.
Yeah. But there's entire words that have been deleted there.
I would say even sentences.
Even sentences. So that means that there was, for this scribe that was writing this text, there was a corrupted text from which he was copying, or a corrupted recitation that he was using.
Absolutely. That had to be changed.
That had to be changed.
You can't have that exposed for the world to see today.
Let's cut to the quick. This bit that you kept trying to jump ahead of me on. What do you think's going on?
Well, pull it right back in your lap. In order to be able to know what to correct, in order to know what to erase or cover or tape or insert, like the hua that we talked at the very beginning, you need to know, you need to have a standard to know what you're going to correct. Am I correct?
Yes. You've got to have something to work towards.
You have to have a standard that you're aligning everything to.
Yes. There's got to be a North Star.
When did that standard exist?
Well, I believe that this is evidence that there was an attempt to standardize the text at some point within Islamic history, when all of these texts were in control of a single Islamic power, and I think that must have been within the Ottoman period.
It's not in the Ottoman period.
So,
show me an Ottoman Quran that would support what you just said.
Well, I am simply hypothesizing.
Okay, let me just tell you what we do now know.
I mean, knock down my argument if you want.
I'm going to knock it down real quickly, because what we now know, and this is Gabriel Said Reynolds, he's the one that, and No Sedan, the two of them wrote this in 2009. So this is nothing new, Dan. This has been out for 10 years.
Yeah.
We're in 2019. What they found out when they did research, and actually the first thing I'm going to say is well known, it's been around for almost 100 years, and that is that they needed in Egypt to make a standard text. And the reason why is that in the high schools in Egypt, when they had standardized tests on theology, they were noticing that the answers had so many different answers because students had memorized the Quran in around 37 different derivations of different types of Qurans.
So to put that into basic English, for those of you that are uninitiated, what happened was when Egypt became independent, they imported Qurans from around the world for their education system, gave them to their students with the assumption that they were all the same. The students then used them in good faith.
That didn't happen when they became independent. Those scripts, those different Qurans have been there since the 8th century. You can get them all over the Arab world, even today.
But the Qurans that were used as books by the students were imported.
Have been there since 896, 796.
I doubt that they would have given students in high school ancient documents to read.
No, just bear with me on this. We can trace them all back to the 9th.
I'm just talking about the books that were in
those books are on. You can go to all. Listen, we have already got 32 of them just by going to the marketplaces in Jordan, Yemen.
Yeah, exactly.
In Morocco today.
Yeah.
In 2018, you can get them. They're still there.
So
here you have students
using different Qurans.
They're bringing these different Qurans from, let's say they're their home Qurans, because they go and they do their homework. Yeah. They're writing out, but they're probably memorizing it as well. And one may be memorizing a Quran that is written by a man named Warsh.
Yeah.
Another is writing a Quran that's written by Al-Duri.
Yeah.
Another is written another Quran that's written by Khalum.
Yeah.
And then you have another Quran named by a man named Hafs.
Yes.
So who are these Al-Duris and these Khalums and these Warsh? And who are these guys? But they're not modern scholars.
Mm-hmm.
These are students from 5 cities that were actually creating their own Qurans up in Mecca, Medina, Kufa, Baghdad, and also in Damascus.
Yeah.
5 cities where they all existed, and they were getting it from their teachers. Most of them lived in the 9th century, but Hafs died in the late 8th century.
Yeah.
So you have all these different Qurans that have completely different writings, different ways of writing these verses. We've just done a comparison of 23 of them, and we've come up with 93,000 differences.
And that's the diacritical differences.
Those are the diacritical differences. So something need to be done.
Let's just unpack diacritical differences. Let me unpack that briefly for my my audience. So the basic structure of the Arabic language has a lot of letters. How many letters are indistinguishable?
28, but 22 of them are. You have to use dots. Only 6 of them are.
So there are 22 letters within the Arabic language that, as they're written in the most basic structure, are indistinguishable from one another. And to create distinguishment between those letters, there's the use of the dots above and below the basic structure of the letter. But you can have one letter, and depending on where you put the dots,
5 different dots.
5 different dots, 1 above, 2 above,
3 above and
3
2 below.
above, or 1 below or 2 below, can actually change what letter you're looking at. And in terms of these Hafs, Duri, Wash, what you have are Qurans with dots in different places, which changes the actual words. It can change a singular to a plural, or it can actually change whether a sentence is passive or active.
Like Katala versus Kutilu.
Yeah.
One is he fought, that means the prophets fought, or he died.
Yeah.
Which would make a huge significance. I'd like to know if I fought or if I die. Well, if I was a prophet.
And not everyone who fights dies.
That's right.
And not everyone who dies fights.
You can go both ways.
Yeah.
But can you see the significance of just something as simple as that?
Okay.
Now,
So these students, they're giving different answers.
Different answers.
Because of differences like this that we just talked about.
And so the Department of Education asked Muhammad ibn al-Haddad, who is a scholar at the Al-Azhar University, considered to be the foremost university in the Muslim world for about 1,000 years now. It's about a 1,000-year-old university. It still is. If he could then go and choose one amongst the 37 that existed there in Egypt, in Cairo, just the city of Cairo, and he chose Hafs.
He chose Hafs.
Why? We don't know.
Okay.
Especially since we know that Hafs is actually derided. He was from Kufa. He wasn't even from Medina or Mecca. You would have thought they'd have chosen an Arab.
Yeah.
He chose actually an Iraqi.
Okay.
Kufa is just south of Baghdad, right? He is part of the Abbasids. He's not even from the Umayyads. He was much later.
Yeah.
Died in 796. But more than that, he was considered to be very dishonest. Now,
Right.
there's a whole nother study now we need to now do on Hafs. But there's not just one Hafs. There's 5 different Hafs. Today, you can
With
find
critical
5
differences. But they're all called Hafs.
They're all called Hafs.
Interesting.
And here's the biggest question. How do we know that the Hafs that he chose is the Hafs that was written? Because where is the original Hafs manuscript?
That Haddad used
Haddad
in the
used.
selection.
Or that we can even say today. Where
That we
is
can
the
compare to the one
Exactly.
that you've got on the shelf.
So these are the questions that were coming up, of course, scholars are asking today. Nonetheless, let's just go ahead back to 1924 when this was chosen. They took all these other ones that students had been bringing to class and been using. They grabbed them all, confiscated them, put them on a boat, and dumped them into the Nile.
Which, if any Westerner had done that, would have been considered to be desecration and blasphemous and a hate crime. But yet the Muslims themselves have done it. Just like
Have we heard a story something like this?
Bukhari burned.
No, not Bukhari.
Uthman, sorry, yes.
Bukhari writes about it. But Uthman, didn't he do something similar, according to
exactly.
Bukhari?
He burned textual variants.
Anything that disagreed?
Anything that disagreed. So what we're seeing is a repeat of history, an attempt to standardise the text.
Well, I would suggest these are doing the same thing as well.
I agree with you, but your conclusion. So come to your conclusion.
I'm going to come to that later. So
Yeah,
that,
come to
that
your
was in
conclusion.
Cairo only.
Because I'm conscious of time, and
That was only in Cairo.
I want to contradict you.
By 1936,
Yeah.
this was such a successful model in the schools in Cairo that the Department of Education for Egypt decided to make this Egypt-wide, and they call it the Al Farouk edition because named after King Farouk, who took over power in 1936 to commemorate his reign.
Yep.
That was in 1936. So in 1985, King Fahd, who is the king of Saudi Arabia, decided to make that Hafs text standard for the entire world.
So the one that they would mass produce.
Which is now what we see here today.
Yeah.
This is the Hilali and Khan. This is written and published in Medina, so it's published in Saudi Arabia. This text that you see here is the Hafs text, but only made standard 34 years ago.
Okay, so now here's the thing, because what we've seen in Islamic history, both within Egypt and Al-Fard, and within the earliest Islamic sources of the hadiths, is that there is this constant striving and failure within the Islamic community to try and codify, systematize, and universalize a unique, perfect text.
Yeah.
They tried it back at the time of Uthman, and they failed. I would suggest to you that this evidence suggests that they tried it centuries later, failed again. But you actually think that actually this indicates something else.
Okay, this is just Jay Smith saying this in May of 2019, and I will probably be derided for saying this.
I'm going to bash you for it.
You're going to bash me for it. He doesn't like me saying this.
I think it's a terrible idea.
But in order to standardize a text, you need to have a standard for which it to be corrected to.
Yes.
How can you do that unless a standard has been codified for the whole world? Because many of these manuscripts, except for one, even were in place in Egypt.
Yeah.
These were all outside of Egypt.
Yeah.
So either they knew what the standard was centuries ago, and they knew they were going to do that, and they just finally got caught up to it. Yeah. If that were the case, then fine, you're right. Maybe this was done centuries ago. The problem I have with that is, it looks like the standardization is coming much more recently, possibly in the last 100 years, possibly since 1924. I would even say possibly even since 1985.
Now, here's where I want to challenge you strongly on your conclusion.
Yeah.
It's undeniable that the evidence demonstrates manipulation of the text. A clear, conscious effort to manipulate the text. That's clear, it's there, you can see it with your own eyes. So that's not the dispute. Because the King Fahd, he has the power to mass produce a document, but he doesn't have the authority to say this text and this text alone. That's not in with his remit. He doesn't have that power to tell every Muslim you should use this. He's not like a pope, you know. And even the Pope couldn't do that. He would need a council. But in terms of the reason why I object to the idea that this occurred post 1920s, 1980s is because, for instance, I'm going to mispronounce it, the Mial, the one here in the British Ma'il, the Ma'il Codex here in the British Library, which is one that Dan Briegeke looked at. Mm-hmm. And he found textual variants with the Ma'il and the 1924 version. Yeah? How long has that been in the British Library?
Since...
At a guess. If you don't know, that's fine.
I'm trying to say the early 1900s.
Early 1900s. I cannot believe that this venerable institution would permit someone to desecrate
because
an ancient
we haven't even looked at to see if But
John Brubaker found textual variants between the Ma'il and the 1924 version.
We don't know whether the variants actually support the 1924 text. That we haven't done yet.
Sorry, did Dan Brubaker find variants between the Ma'il and
none of these so far are mine.
Oh, right. My apologies. I assumed. But
you're correct, because we do have the Petropolis, which is in Paris.
Right.
Which is under the authority of Francois British.
The idea that the French government would allow someone to come and desecrate an ancient manuscript. Did you know how of it? For someone to come in the late 1980s and then change the text means that an authority within the state, a museum, a responsible person, would have had to sign that off.
Let me put it right back at you. I agree with you. I'm aware of that problem. So how do you think it all happened? How do you think they all were able to standardize it to one text?
Well, firstly, I think that what demonstrates is that there is an attempt, a continuous attempt within the Islamic world to try and standardize a text. That this shows a movement within the Islamic world that contradicts their own narrative, because remember, Muslims have this narrative that the Wash and the Duri and all these other recitations all go back to Muhammad, so they're meant to be all equally valid.
Who says that?
Well, Muslim apologists. They say it today, in today's world. I know. Yeah, exactly.
Did they say that earlier than today?
Well,
Or are they saying that in the 1800s?
I couldn't say.
They aren't. This is a new polemic. This is not new apologetic, sorry. This is a new apologetic.
It's like inventing a new belief, isn't it?
It's almost they had to because they come across the Bible. The more they come across the Bible, the more they're making claims for the Quran. This is a polemic between Christianity and Islam.
Yeah.
That's why I love it that they're making these claims. Did you notice? We were there yesterday, but you were there. Every Muslim we asked, even Mansour, when we asked him, is this the exact text? The guy that we started with, we asked him, is this the exact word for word the same? Yes, it is. Is it letter for letter the same? Yes, it is. Is it diacritical mark for diacritical? He said, yes, it was.
And it's not.
It's on film.
It's not.
But even Mansour made the claim that we can find this continuous textual, family that goes right back. He did say with the Prophet Muhammad, he quickly reneged on that and said, at least back to Uthman.
But they could prove
So
that.
he did that. He's saying that on the letter.
We're going to have to wrap up. I mean, Mansour, you could easily win your argument, mate. Just get me a text from 1824, 1724, 1624, 1524, 1424, 1324, all the way back, as early as you can.
Go back to Uthman.
Yeah, go all the way back to Uthman. Just bring them all out, mate. You know, it's 14.
Now, he did
14
answer that
text,
yesterday.
14 text.
We asked him, is there anything
Got
for
three
Uthman? He said no. We asked him, is there any manuscript that is complete by the 7th century? He said no. Well, we had to force him to say no because he just would not want to answer that. So we finally said, so when is the earliest complete text that you have? And he finally admitted that by 721 there was 97%. But what he did say is they're not in one text.
But 97
a little
is
bit
not,
here, a little bit here, a little bit here.
97 is not 100.
It's not 100, and that's 100 years later.
So
that's the 8th century.
So all you have to do, Mansour, is bring out this chain of texts that all match one another down through the centuries, and you win your argument. But Jay, we're going to have to stop there and invite everyone to buy the book. You're a difficult man to interview, but I love you lots.
There you go. Get this book right here.
Get this book. Guys, equip yourself, oh Christians. Anyway. Thank you very much.
They have reading anywhere in the world today. Anywhere you go. This reading we know, it's been preserved even to the dot, to the letter, to the vowel, to the sound.